If you're feeling stuck in a current situation in your life, or you know you need a change, but you might be unsure of what that change is, or unable to get yourself to take steps to actually do it, this episode is for you. I'm going to share my personal story about how 3 or 4 months ago, I went from feeling extremely stuck and extremely unhappy in my situation in New York City in a corporate job to now feeling way more free, feeling way more at peace, and feeling like a much happier version of myself. But before you turn off this episode and say, okay, this girl is just going to tell me to quit my corporate job with no safety net, jump off the deep end and take this big risk. No. Okay, she's just going to recite off steps from ChatGPT to feel unstuck. Not going to do that either. What I am going to do is share with you my personal experience, what I was really feeling, what I was really experiencing during that time, and the steps I took, and more importantly, the questions I actually allowed myself to ask myself to get clarity on what I needed to do and find that courage to do it. Because yes, a big part of my story was stepping away from my corporate job. But let me preface, this was not a huge risk that I decided to do overnight. This was not something that I did not think through, and this was not something that I didn't plan ahead for. It took a long time for me to get to that point where I finally took the step. It took a lot of buildup. It took a lot of reflection and preparation and really asking the big questions. Because let me preface, I am not the type B, happy-go-lucky, takes risks without thinking it through. Absolutely not. I'm extremely type A. I love stability in life. I have this deep desire to control things. I wanted that stable path, and stepping away from that stable corporate income was terrifying. So I promise you, if you resonate to any of this listening, if any of this speaks to you, if you're also maybe a little bit of that type, hopefully what I was personally feeling and going through in this episode will be those answers that you really need to hear and inspire you to maybe take small steps to get to a point where you can start to feel more unstuck in whatever situation's coming to mind for you. So let's dive in a little bit more. So like I said, I was living in New York City. I was working a corporate job at a hedge fund and just really didn't like it. I knew I didn't love it for a while. And on top of that, New York City was really exciting when I first moved there, but it got to a point coming up on 3 years in where I decided it really wasn't for me anymore. It's a big hustle. It's a lot to keep up with. And not to mention it's super expensive. And I really value wellness and nature and well-being. And it's just not really the place I wanted to be anymore. So of course, given that the two biggest environments in my life were ones that were really not serving me or making me happy, I was feeling very stuck and I was feeling very unhappy. And on top of that, I was just working double time on the podcast on evenings and weekends because I was like, okay, well, I'm not really happy in this job or in this city. So I'm just going to double down on the one thing I love that I think is going for me. So naturally that led to burnout, which was a fun cherry on top. So that's to set the scene. And essentially I got to a point where I was just really low. I was crying a lot. I was calling my family a lot. My energy was low. I was feeling unmotivated. I was burnt out and just feeling down. And I knew I needed to make a change. What I didn't know was what that change was or where to even start. So the first thing that I did was take a step back and get more clarity as to what is it specifically in my life that's making me feel this way so strongly? What is making me feel so stuck? Because you can't make change if you don't first get clarity on what it is in your life that's making you feel that way. Because otherwise you're going to make all these changes that might not even be effective or might not even be targeting that thing that's keeping you feeling the most stuck. So I asked the question, what is it that's keeping me feeling this way? What is making me feel so stuck in my current situation? And the first obvious answer, like I kind of just alluded to, my corporate job. Like I said, I wanted to leave for a while. I really didn't love it. But for some reason, I never let myself step away because I grew up in this town and community where a stable 9 to 5 is the path. Going down business, making stable money, going to college, following that track, that's what you do. And on top of that, I was living in a city in New York City where hustle culture is real. It's like the finance capital of the world. All of my friends and everyone that I was surrounding myself by was in these 9 to 5s and working long hours and working really hard. So between how I grew up, where I went to college, and the environment and where I was living, a 9 to 5 really was all I was considering. And stepping away from that stability terrified me because, again, like I shared in the beginning of the episode, I do like stability. I don't love taking risks. I like the idea that there's certainty and there's control. At least I really used to. I'm obviously getting a lot better at stepping into that uncertainty and taking more risks when it benefits me. So what I realized was the thing that was keeping me most stuck in that corporate job was the story I was telling myself in my mind. No one was holding a gun to my head keeping me there. No one was saying I couldn't make a change. It was me. It was me telling myself, oh, you should stay. Oh, it wouldn't be smart to leave. Like, oh, this makes most sense right now. So it was these shoulds. I was the only one making myself stay. And because I was telling myself that narrative that like I should, this makes sense, I really wasn't allowing myself previously to take a step back and actually consider and see all of the other possibilities that I could take steps towards instead. Like stepping away from this job didn't mean that I was going to be homeless and broke and die alone. No, it means that I just pursue other things. I take steps towards other means of income. Because really the other thing keeping me at this job, like the only thing, was the stable income. Living in New York City is expensive. I had an expensive rent. I lived alone in my own apartment, which I loved. And I was telling myself, I need to stay in this job to pay rent, to afford this life in New York as I grow the podcast on the side. And like, of course, the podcast gives me some income, but it didn't feel smart for me to just put all the eggs in one basket. And again, I was just telling myself that should narrative that I should stay. And finally realizing that it was these shoulds in that narrative keeping me stuck, I allowed myself to start to question that. Like, why do I need a stable 9-to-5 in finance to make money? Why can't I pursue other paths? Why can't I follow all the other entrepreneurs who are maybe pursuing multiple streams of income, who are taking risks, who are falling back on savings for a little bit to make a change that's going to benefit them long term? Why can't I pursue another path that's going to be that vehicle to live my life? Because I had this one thought that I really couldn't unshake when I was thinking about all of this. Okay, if this quote stable job is supposed to be the vehicle for me to live a happy life, and in my life I'm currently very unhappy, what good is this job doing me? Is this job serving me at all? And I could not unsee that because I knew that if I stayed at that job after that I would just be continuing down this hamster wheel of feeling unhappy in this situation. And it was just that clarity that I needed and that I couldn't shake and unsee. So it was that thought that really gave me the nudge to make a change. And what I needed to accept when I did make that change was I probably won't have that stable paycheck and income for a little bit here. But often change and taking steps to really invest in yourself and pursue something, it might feel like taking a couple steps back if, let's say, you take a pay cut or you step away from that stability a little bit, but it's taking one step back to take 3 or 10 or 100 steps forward, right? And what I really realized and what I was telling myself was, okay, I need to step away from this thing that feels maybe, quote, safe and stable if I want to be happy, but more importantly, if I want to pursue this thing that I really love. And it's not taking a step backwards, it's taking a step towards a life that's really going to make me happy. But of course, I didn't want to step away without a plan, right? Because again, type A, I'm not the risk taker type that just goes for it and dives off the deep end. And like I promised you in the beginning of this episode, that is not what I'm going to tell you to do. So I got practical, right? Like, okay, really the only thing keeping me in New York and in this job is paying my rent. So what can I do to pay for rent, right? I found a subletter who was going to take over the rest of my rent in New York. And now I'm living home in Chicago for these couple months before I move somewhere in the fall. So what I did was like pinpoint the thing that was really feeling like it was keeping me stuck, or at least that thing that I felt like I needed to cover to like protect myself a little bit. So I had a plan moving forward. And when I took that step to leave my job, when I actually put in that notice and had that conversation, it was the biggest weight off my shoulders. It was so validating to know that I was following my gut intuition and trusting that this path was no longer meant for me. And I was just taking steps towards this business that I'm building, this passion and purpose that I'm pursuing. And it felt really great. And even taking that first step started to allow me to feel a little bit less stuck. And it gave me that momentum to continue to take steps. Because another reason I was feeling so stuck in that job was every single minute I spent at that job, it felt like time that was taking away from the podcast and growing my coaching business. These things that I really love and what I know I'm meant to do. And that was really difficult because I knew that if I had the time and energy to really invest in this, then it could be so successful. And so taking that first step was really the first wave of feeling a little bit less stuck. So then I was like feeling all motivated to continue to take steps, right? I'm like, okay, I just did like probably the hardest thing. Now I can take another step, right? Okay, so the other thing was I knew I didn't want to stay in New York City. And again, New York's very expensive. And if I wasn't going to be working a finance 9 to 5, yeah, it's tough to make a living in New York. And again, I didn't really want to be there. So, okay, I have a subletter. And then I started to question, where would I like to live? And really gave this some thought about the life that I wanted. Because again, I knew I wanted to change, but I didn't know what city. I didn't really know where it was going to be a good fit for me or where I should go. So I just started to reflect. I started to do research. I started to ask, what life do I want to be living? What kind of people do I want to surround myself by? What would be a good city and environment to grow the podcast in, to teach yoga? And like, where do I want to go? And gave it some thought, like really researched it. And I landed on Austin, Texas. And again, didn't want to just take a risk and move down there without considering it. So I went and spent a week down there, verified that I loved it. But ultimately, the reason I'm telling you all these details was I just took one baby step at a time. All I knew was I wanted to move out of New York City, didn't know where that was going to be, but I took a step back and allowed myself to open my mind to all the different places I could move to. And once I did that, then like, okay, let's go plan a trip down there because that's low stakes, right? It's not like I'm up and moving there before really experiencing it. So trial and error, baby steps, but continuing to just take small steps away from that situation that's keeping you stuck is really key. Because again, similar to leaving my job, every time I took one step closer towards solidifying that move to Austin and solidifying the subletter and taking steps away from that corporate job, I felt more and more free and less stuck. And it's all because I was just taking baby steps and allowing myself to open my mind to all of the possibilities. Because again, it was my mindset and that narrative that I was telling myself as to why I was feeling stuck in New York. I didn't even open my mind to the fact that I could move cities and experience a whole new place and environment until actually my brother on the chairlift on a family vacation was like, well, it sounds like you're not happy in New York. Why don't you like move elsewhere? Like you've always wanted to go experience new cities and travel. I'm like, you know what? Funny enough, I literally never thought of that. And then the second he said that, it just opened my mind to all these different possibilities. And so one important note that I want to add in here is, again, the people and environment that you surround yourself by is so important, because how they're living their life and the narratives that they're replaying and maybe like reciting to you as well, you're going to absorb that. You might absorb those as shoulds as to how you're going to live your life, but those might be keeping you stuck in that situation. And so again, went down to Austin, Texas. And another really awesome thing that I experienced when I was down there was so many people down there are not doing the 9 to 5 thing. So many of them have side hustles, or so many of them are just combining multiple different streams of income and have different passions and purposes that they're following. It's not like one job that they're grinding in or one means of income. It just felt so much more aligned and inspiring and fitting with what I'm doing here with Fulfilled, being in an environment where that would feel a lot more supported, rather than feeling all this resistance in New York City that I was feeling, like not telling any of my coworkers at my 9 to 5 about the podcast because they wouldn't understand it, right? Or feeling like I didn't have any time and energy to invest in it because I was working these long hours in this really demanding job. Austin felt like an environment where not only the people were very supportive and open-minded to all of the different possibilities in life, but I just felt a lot more at peace and aligned, which is another sign that I knew that I was taking steps towards feeling less stuck and trusting my intuition and following a path that was a lot more aligned. And again, it took taking steps, and it took just opening my mind to all of the different possibilities. So I know I shared a lot of personal things in this episode, but again, reason being, if you're listening and you resonated to this, or this opened your eyes and perspective and inspired you a little bit, know that whatever situation you're feeling stuck in, there are so many possibilities. There are so many ways you can make changes. And again, when I made those changes, when I left the job, when I left New York, when I took all of those steps that I just explained, I feel so much less stuck. I feel so much more at peace and so much more aligned with what I'm doing. And yes, it was terrifying. Yes, it took me a long time to walk away from that job, to leave the city after I felt unhappy for a while. To figure all of that out, it took time. It took a lot of steps, one after another. And yes, it was scary. It continues to be uncertain, but I know it was what I was meant to do. And I know I would so much prefer to feel unstuck and free and aligned with the life I'm living, rather than stay in a situation that's quote safe and quote stable, but remain feeling so unhappy and so stuck. So if you're resonating with this, Start by asking the question, what is keeping you feeling stuck? What is it specifically in your life that's making you feel that way? Is it that story, those shoulds you're telling yourself? Is it just that narrative you're telling yourself in your mind that you need to stay or that you can't make a change? Is it maybe the people or your environment that are contributing to making you feel like you can't change or that there aren't other options? And then once you allow yourself to take a step back and to get clarity, because if you're like me, you're going to realize that nobody's keeping you stuck there except for yourself, except for your mindset. Take one step at a time. Start by even researching other options, right? Trial and error, try something out. Because when you take that first step, yes, that is the scariest and hardest step. But after that step, that is your momentum, because then you're just going to take another. And soon enough, you're going to be living a life that feels far more free and far less stuck and entrapping and feeling so much more fulfilled in your day to day. And you deserve that. So whether it be that job, that city, that relationship, those friends, whatever you're feeling stuck in, life is too short to live a life that makes you feel stuck and to not feel fulfilled day to day. So I hope this story and this episode inspired you in some way if you're feeling stuck in an area of your life. If it did, it would mean the world to me if you supported the show by pressing follow or subscribe, leave a rating or a review wherever you are listening. And I will see you all again soon on your journeys to feeling more fulfilled.